Hi everyone, my name is Jorge Gamba and I'm one of the registered migration agents here at Aussizz Group. I'm located at level 1, 290 Collins Street, Melbourne. And today I want to discuss a few things that have popped up in a few of the consultations and a few recurring themes that clients ask about. One of them being, when I came to Australia 3 years ago, I was told that if I studied accounting or engineering or IT, and if I got at least 65 points, 70 points, I'd be guaranteed PR. And now that time has passed and I've studied accounting or those fields, and now I have 80 points, I'm not even getting an invitation. Why? I'm gonna discuss that in detail in a few minutes. Also, I'm gonna discuss something along the lines of why do so many self-lodged applications get refused? Daily we see one or two clients who try to navigate the system themselves, and for one reason or another, they come up against refusal, because the GT wasn't written right, they didn't meet the criteria at the time of application, they waited too long to apply for TR while they were a student. Those kind of things happen a lot. And you would think, I'm a smart person, I can navigate the system myself. I don't need an agent. Why should I hire an agent? I can do my own visa. In some circumstances, you can, absolutely. The system is designed in such a way that everything is in the public domain. And we at Aussizz, we are very generous with the information. You'll notice that our Facebook page, our other social media, our Instagram is full of information. We tell you everything. There's no secrets between you and I, okay? Because we want you to know exactly what we're doing. And we want to be as forthcoming and as honest as possible about the criteria. We don't want to, the last thing we want is a client who says, you told me I could get PR if I did this and that, and I did that and I couldn't. We are very honest about all the information. It's all in the public domain, but unfortunately sometimes if you're not familiar with the system, you can get tripped up a little bit, and that can cost you a lot of headaches. I'm going to discuss that, and I'm going to discuss how you can prevent that as well. And I'm also going to discuss what are some of the best states to live in, what are some of the best courses to study for PR, what are some of the best fields to gain entry into employment, because we know that a lot of the times, it's easy to study, but if you are going to get experience, most employers will say, well, I want you to have experience before I employ you. And you'll say, well, I need experience so I can get this employment. It's a catch-22. How do you get around that? I'm going to discuss a little bit about that and a few tips that you can adopt. So if you have anyone who you have in mind could benefit from this talk, feel free to tag them along. I'm going to leave my phone number on the comments below afterward, and I'm going to answer some of your questions. So feel free to type some of your questions below, and after the talk is finished, I'll do my best to get to as many of you as possible within the next 24 hours. And you can always find me at Melbourne branch in Collins Street. We've got Elizabeth Street, Thomastown, Clayton, Werribee. We've got offices all around Australia, in Adelaide, Sydney, Perth, in India, in Dubai, and in New Zealand as well. So there's no shortage of agents. We have agents that speak all languages: Malay, French, Farsi, Punjabi, Gujarati, Hindi, Spanish. I speak Spanish. I'm Colombian, so I speak Spanish. That's my native tongue. And if you have any friends who speak Spanish and they'd like to have a consultation in Spanish, I'm more than happy to have that as well. Okay, so I'm going to start now with how many points are enough to get invited. Well, I'll step back a little bit. You see, in Australia, we have a quota, an annual quota for new permanent residents. Now, Australia is very happy to have you come and study here. Australia is very happy for you to come and spend your parents' money studying a master's degree, a diploma, bachelor's, a PhD, wherever, and investing those 20, 30, 40K in that degree. And we have about almost 1 million students, I'd say, comfortably in Australia, okay? But when it comes down to permanent residents, the annual quota is actually 160,000 places. So you compare 800,000 students and 160,000 places for new PR, then you know that not everybody's going to get PR. So you have to be very competitive to get PR. In that 160,000 people quota, you include people who have a partner, an Australian partner or a New Zealand partner, people who are sponsored by companies, parents, minor children who are sponsored on child visas, employee sponsored, which I've just mentioned, and the refugee intake as well. We've got about 14,000 refugee intake a year. And then you have the point system. And in the point system, last year, Australia invited about 23,000 people for the 189. And the states and territories, they invited themselves about 21,000 people as well. And those numbers are shared proportionately between the states. So New South Wales, being the biggest state, invited the most amount of people. Victoria next, and Queensland, then South Australia, WA, and Tasmania. Now, out of all of them, actually Tasmania invites proportionately the most number of people. Now, one of the issues of people going to Tasmania, although Tasmania is a beautiful state, it's brilliant, it's absolutely gorgeous. You can study in Tasmania. You can study, for example, a diploma of community services, the Tasmania TAFE, which will get you a skills assessment as a community worker. It's about, I think it's a 12 to 18 month course. It's not very expensive. It's about $13,000. And then you can apply for 190 New South Wales or 491 Tasmania when it opens after November 16. But one of the main issues that comes up with people who have come back from Tasmania is that they couldn't find jobs to support themselves. It's very easy to enroll yourself in a school and get a student visa to study in Tasmania and maybe find accommodation. That's not too bad. But finding employment, that's going to be the tricky part. So when you look at where am I going to study, or if you're already studying in, let's say, Melbourne and you're thinking of moving, there's a number of considerations you have to make, because you're the one who's going to be spending the money, making the investment, going to Adelaide, going to Perth, going to Darwin, and relocating. Most of you have moved already here in Australia, those who are watching us live from Australia. Most of you made already the first move. You already moved countries once. And even if you moved to another city, like let's say Melbourne to Adelaide, that's like moving to a new country. You know, you got to leave your friends behind, you have to leave the job behind, you have to leave all the things you know here, those employment connections you might have made already, and go and start again in another place. You know, it's easy to think, okay, I can only, you know, I'll go to Adelaide and I'll study there for 12 months, or I'll find a job in my area for 12 months. You know, that's easy enough, but, you know, would you find the jobs to support yourself? Remember, there's 800,000 or so students in Australia at any one time, and the annual quota is 160,000. You have to be very competitive. So when we tell you, you have to do NAATI if you can, because not every language is a NAATI language. For example, Gujarati and Telugu are not NAATI languages for now. Professional year, if it's available to you, right? If you studied bachelor's or master's in accounting, IT, or engineering, that's expensive as well, but you know, that's going to help you get 5 points. Get to the PTE 79 on each band. Get to the maximum amount of score in the PTE. That's really going to help you. That's going to set you apart from a lot of candidates, because the biggest filter that I know as a migration agent in my years doing this business is that there's a big difference between getting 10 points and those 20 points that you get for the maximum score in the English language, be it PTE, TOEFL, OET, PTE. That's the biggest filter I know. That's where the tiers lie. You see, going from 7 to 8 on the IELTS, going from 65 to 79 on the PTE. That's really the biggest filter that I know. Most people can come here and study. Most people who are going for PR are usually between 28 to 35. So they'll be in that 30 to 25 point range. Not everybody can go for state sponsorship, because state sponsorship is quite complex and every state has its own filter. But most of you will be around, you know, 60 to 70 points. And the biggest filter to jump out of that is doing the PTE. Now, some of you would have already done PTE, NAATI, professional year, you've studied here, you've got about 85 points, and let's say you're an ICT business analyst. And you're thinking, you know what, I was told that if I got 65 points, I would get invited, and I'm not getting invited. I can tell you, my reading of the situation, which is that the government's waiting to punish people who have a partner who doesn't speak English at PTE 50 level and doesn't have a skills assessment. Because after November 16 this year, the government will introduce the law that will help single people get 10 points and that will punish those people. Because what the government's saying many times is that, look, when we offer you PR, we'll get you, you're very skilled, you've got a skills assessment and occupation that is in demand, you've got English, you've studied here, so you've already made an investment in Australia, so we want to make an investment back in you. You're the right age, so you're not too old, too young, so you have enough years in you to last a good number of years in the tax base, contributing through your work. And then you've done a number of things. Maybe you speak community language as well, so you'll be able to fit in the community. And you did all that, and no invitations are coming. So, right, it's going to be very hard. Right now, the last few rounds, only 100 people each round got invited. So in the September round, there was about 100 people invited. In the August round, 100 people. And in the July round, there was 1,000 people. There was a bit of relief there, but still not yet. My expectation is that we will see in the October and November round as well, very low numbers. And then after that, the 25,000 people quota for the 189, it's going to progressively get full. Okay, so they're going to invite more people. What I'm saying is that they're going to invite more people after the 16 November round. That's my expectation. Of course, no agent can predict this. No agent can tell you with a high degree of certainty how many invitations they're going to invite each number, because those invitations are given by the Minister of Immigration, right? And that person has the discretion to invite 5 people, 10 people, if they see fit. There is a planning level, there's a quota, and Australia does need a lot of skilled migrants. We've got shortages in many key areas like nursing, like trades, in some engineering, in some mechanical fields, in tourism industry, chefs. It's a job that is in high demand, and usually the best chefs from Australia go overseas. So then there's vacancies here that we need to fill with foreigners. So Australia is still inviting people, but at the moment you will see that the quota is getting very tight until the 16th November, when the next rounds will start. The December round, the January round, and for those of you who are not familiar with the point system, every 11th of every month the government invites people for the 189, which is kind of a lottery, but it's not a lottery in the random sense. It's a lottery that you have to climb up and beat other people to get an invitation. And once you get an invitation, you can apply. Just having an expression of interest, and this is a key point, that those who make an expression of interest do not automatically get a bridging visa. That doesn't automatically give you a bridging visa. You need to have applied, so you need to have received the invitation. Just because you entered your EOI doesn't mean that if your student visa is expiring, that you can just hang around. You need to extend. And for those of you who did the right thing, they came to Australia and studied a master's, studied a bachelor's, and then went on to TR, the 45, for the next 2 years or 18 months if you study diploma level qualification, and you're about to expire. What do you do? Let's say that you're expiring in December, in November, in October, and you're not seeing any invitations. Maybe you have 75, maybe you have 80 points, and nothing's coming up. You will most likely need to extend. And my recommendation for those of you who are in that situation is that you extend as soon as possible. Why? Because I've seen this in the past where immigration will refuse visas if you apply too late when your current visa is expiring. So let's say, for example, that you are going to expire in November, and then you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to wait until the very last day to apply for my student extension. Well, that can actually be harmful to you, because the government, the case officer, is going to say, well, I think you're just trying to buy time. You're not really that interested in studying, because if you were interested in studying, you would have studied maybe a little bit earlier. You're just trying to buy time because you lodged the visa at the very last moment. And I've seen also refusals back from the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, who affirmed the decision from the case officer saying, yep, we agree with them, you were just trying to buy time. And for those of you who if that happens to you, then you need to go take it to the next level of appeal, which is the federal court. And when you go to the federal court, there's no guarantee the federal court will give you a hearing, because I'll explain a little bit about the appeals process. If you get a refusal and you are onshore, then you have the right to appeal that refusal within 21 days. And that usually will buy you some time, but maybe not too much, between 6 to 18 months time, until the tribunal decides to call you for a hearing. And when they call you for a hearing, they'll invite you to make new submissions, they'll invite you to provide new evidence, they'll invite you to basically produce the application again de novo, which means as if new. And if the AAT say no, then your next option is to apply to the federal court. And that can be an expensive process. So you want to save yourself that headache. So if you are someone who's studying or who is on TR now and you need to extend, but you're waiting to see if there's an invitation coming up and maybe you have 75 points, 80 points, unfortunately, my advice is that you need to extend as soon as possible. Because if you don't do that, then by the time you're going to extend, you most likely will probably get refused. Now, you can still get an invitation while you're awaiting appeal. But if you want to accept it, you will need to travel offshore and then accept it from offshore. You will not be able to accept new applications while you're here. So, let's say that you're studying, you just started a bachelor's of business or a master's in management. Those courses don't really lead anywhere. They're not really aligned to any other occupation apart from accounting. And those of you who studied accounting know how competitive it is right now. Accountants need around 90 to 95 points. I mean, it's crazy to think that 3 or 4 years ago, you can get invited with 60 points, and now 90, 95 points, maybe after the single people get those 10 points, the system will shift a little bit towards the right. So everybody will need 100 points, 105 points if you're an accountant, for example, or 95 points if you're a systems analyst or a mechanical engineer. So that's going to make it very competitive. So if you're studying a course like that, I would suggest that you reconsider and then you change to something along the lines of a trade course. You could potentially study it at the same time, concurrently with your bachelor's. But then that's going to be not only expensive, but that's going to take up all of your time. You won't be able to see and enjoy Australia if you're doing that. And how are you going to fit in work with that as well? That's going to be tricky. Some of you may be able to downgrade, but that's not something I recommend on a regular basis, because if you downgrade and you're not careful with it, the department can actually cancel your visa. They'll say, well, you breached the conditions of your visa because you were here on a higher education 500 visa, and then you're going to vet. We are not going to allow that, so your visa is cancelled. If the department cancels your visa, that's actually a really big deal. You need to respond to a notice of intention to cancel within 5 days, within 5 working days from when you get that. And basically, when they send you that, that's basically them their way of saying, we're going to cancel you, unless you show a really good reason why you went from accounting to chef to cooking. Now, that's something we can help you with as well, but bear in mind that that's not an easy process. And if you do that, you basically shoot yourself in the foot. My recommendation is that you study these things concurrently, so that you not only get a trade course that is on the list, but then that you also have access to a 45 visa that is 2 years, okay? Because you can get a 45 visa that is 2 years in length if you study bachelor's level qualification, at least for 92 weeks, registered for 92 weeks. And also you will get those 15 points that you wouldn't otherwise get if you only study diploma, in which case you'd only get 10 points. So you'll be, disadvantaged if you don't study concurrently, because other people who study concurrently, remember, the point system is a competitive system. You're competing against other people. And, it's sorry to say, but, not everyone is going to get PR. Some of you already may be looking at Canada, New Zealand and all that, but there's not much for Australia. This is really the best country. So you really want to, with all due respect to my Canadian and New Zealand friends, you basically want to maximize your chances to stay here, and you might need to do things that you wouldn't otherwise want to do, like 2 courses at the same time. But I can tell you that many of my clients are doing that very thing, and they will get points and potentially surpass you in the queue because they'll be doing things at the same time. And I met with a gentleman last week. Excellent. He got invited as a motor mechanic to Southern England, but guess what? He was studying accounting, but at the same time he was studying a trade course. He was studying certificates in mechanic, and then he was also doing his job ready program at the same time as he was finishing his last year of accounting. So he ended up having 2 skills assessments, one an accountant and one as a motor mechanic. But guess which one is going to help him the most? Motor mechanic. Why? Because accounting, engineering, and IT are overly subscribed. There's far too many people applying for these types of skills assessment and visas through these occupations than there are spots. For example, in IT, there's about 8,700 spots for programmers, like developer programmer, software engineer, analyst programmer, things like that. And then there's about 2,500 for ICT business analysts and 2,500 for computer network systems engineers and ICT security specialists. But let me tell you, there's not 2,000 people studying this and 2,000 people studying this. There's a good healthy 25,000 people studying those courses. So just mathematically alone, not everybody's going to get PR. But if you want to get PR, you really need to do everything that is in your disposal to do it. If you say, I don't want to do English, the PT exam is too hard, I don't want to try anymore. Well, unfortunately, if you say that, someone else will try it many times over. And I have a client from Sri Lanka. He's done the test 15 times. But, in his case, there's no turning back. There's no going back. He's got to do it. He's got to get there. And he will get there. I've met clients who've done it maybe 10, 12 times. It's very frustrating, especially if you've already studied and, you came here with a promise. If you get 60, 65 points, you can get PR. Well, nowadays it's so competitive. You really need to maximize everything. Fortunately or unfortunately, there is very few ways you can maximize your points. Age, experience, studying in Australia, studying in a regional area. For very few of you, studying a master's by research or PhD, I've got a few clients doing that. Experience outside Australia, experience here, English, NAATI, speaking the community languages if you speak one, in professional year, but that's not open to everybody. So there's about 7 or 8 forms of increasing your points. There's not a lot of other things you can do outside of that. So that way the system is fairly predictable, but at the same time it's very rigid, it's very inflexible. It doesn't let you do other things. I wish if you could write an essay and then increase your points by that. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So there's very few ways you can maximize your points, but you have to do it. And if you've already maxed out your points through everything except for experience, well, then you need to start looking for that experience. You need to start, dipping your fingers in the market. You need to start doing those internships. You need to start doing those volunteer jobs in, related fields so that you can meet someone there who may potentially help you get a job down the line. Now, I'll finish the points on that. Points at the moment now is quite tough. We're only expecting about 100 invitations over the next 2 to 3 rounds, and then my expectation is that the invitations will increase, and as a result of that, mathematically, points come down because supply and demand. Now, I just want to touch briefly on an area that gets I see a lot of the time, which is clients coming to me with refused applications when they self-lodge. So I was discussing this with my team, and we came up with a list of some of the things that make it so likely that self-lodge applicants will get refusal. Okay, one of them is simple errors, clerical errors. So I was dealing about 2 years ago with a client from South America, and she's a very smart lady. She did a PhD. She's incredibly gifted in the medical field, and I think she got a scholarship to do that. She's very, very smart. So this is someone who's very brainy, and she can do any application herself. Unfortunately, she ticked the wrong stream on her 485 visa. She'd done a PhD, so she was eligible for the 485 post-study work stream. Unfortunately, she ticked the graduate stream. Now, that's a very silly mistake, and you think, surely I would avoid making that. But when you're not familiar with immigration, it's very likely for you to miss those little things like that. It's very likely. You'll be surprised how much the system in the interface changes all the time. There's new questions popping up in the system all the time. So then you need to be careful about that, not making silly mistakes like that, because that can get you refused. And guess what? In her case, she was eligible for a 45 that was 4 years in duration. Imagine having a 4-year visa with no restriction. That's almost like PR. But unfortunately, in her case, she was refused. And I was able to bring her back. She went to Bali for a day and then brought her back fortunately, in her case, she had a sponsor willing to bring her back, because otherwise, what options does she have left? Come here on a visitor visa or something. It's going to be tough. Now, the other thing that gets refused a lot of the times and this is something that I really sometimes enjoy hearing, but sometimes I dislike hearing, which is when clients say, my friend did this, my friend did that, and my friend got PR this way. I understand that a lot of you, let's say most of you students, and then you're all trying to get PR, so you'll be sharing information between one another about tricks, about how to get this job, how to go about the skills assessment, how to approach this course, and how to get PR. And then you'll find along the way that you can share information and tips and that, and help each other that way. But one thing you gotta understand that is every case is different. Your case is different from the case of someone else. Even if you're the same age and studied the same thing, everybody's circumstances is different. So because your friend did this and your friend did that, surely that may be able to help you, guide you a little bit, but you gotta be careful not to follow blindly someone else, because a lot of the times where someone gets refused is because my friend told me to apply for this, to apply for that, and then end up getting refused. If I had a penny for every time a client told me, my friend did this, my friend did that, why can't I do that? I'd be a rich man, I'd be retired in the Bahamas now. So I'm just going to leave that at that. Be careful of following your friends, because the laws change very frequently. The system, the interface of the system changes quite frequently. There's new laws coming from time to time. And if you follow your friends, well, one of the things that could happen is you can get refused. Another thing that could happen is that you might miss opportunities that come your way, because the laws change so much and new occupation lists are popping up everywhere. Like today, one popped up in the far north coast in Queensland. That's one for a 42 in which you need an employer. But anyways, that's just the nature of the system. Occupation lists come from time to time and they pop up regularly. So, if you follow your friends and just, focus on what your friend did, then you might miss opportunities that were open for you. Another thing that makes people want to do their own applications, and I don't blame them for this, is they've had bad experiences with other agents. So other agents, my other agents stuffed up my visa, they never answer my emails, they don't answer my calls, or they charge me too much, or that agent didn't know what they were talking about. I had to train them, they didn't know about my visa. How can I trust them? I understand that, and there are very, very good agents out there, as well as there are some, not so good, but there are many, many fine agents out there. Our profession is regulated by the MARA, okay? That's the Migration Authority regulation in Australia. It's a very, very strict occupation to be in. You're subject to many codes. The code of conduct is quite a strict code, and you need to undergo quite a high level of academic training to get there. And also you need to comply with a number of regulations, and you need to renew your license every year, and you need to complete CPD points, continual professional development points, so that you're up to date with everything. And we're also a very friendly, collegiate group. We've got our MI forum in which people share information. We've got various Facebook groups in which agents themselves share tips and success stories and pitfalls and that. So, don't be discouraged. If you had a bad experience with an agent before, don't be discouraged. Go and see a few agents. This is your life, this is your future. I mean, you invest happily $50,000 on a master's in Australia, but you won't spend, $100 on a consultation with a couple of agents. Go and have a look, and go and meet with different agents and work out which opinion you like the best, and then you make your decision based on that. We have very, very fine agents here at Aussizz. We've got some of the best people in the business doing this for many, many years, and combined total, maybe we've got about 50 years experience just in this office. So I encourage you to come and visit us. Let's have a conversation about your case. You know, if you've got a friend of a friend success story, you know, bring it with you and we'll share it. You know, put your questions in the comments below. I'll answer them later. And if I'd like to have an appointment, you know, feel free to hit me up on WhatsApp or on the Messenger. I'll be tagged along here. Just leave a comment below. We'll call you or we'll answer your questions later on. That's it for me. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I hope to get to have a chance to talk to you about your chances for PR, and hopefully we'll get you there. See you next time, guys. Take care.